It's time to kick back the clock a few notches and take a look at Magic's first set. What stuck around from it, and what failed miserably? Prepare yourself for a little blast from the past. Coming up next, Alpha mechanics. Where are they now? Good morning, Magic. I'm Gavin Verhey from Wizards of the Coast, and in 1993, Alpha came out, and with it, 7 named mechanics. Now, notably, there were mechanics which appeared unkeyworded here, and were keyworded later, like Vigilance, Fear, and, Island Home. But today, I just want to focus on the 7 keyword mechanics Alpha had and ask the question, where is this family of keywords now? First, let's see what good old Regeneration has been up to. In Alpha, there were 10 cards which regenerated or caused other cards to regenerate, from Death Ward to Drudge Skeletons. This mechanic means a lot of things, and not what many players expect. If something regenerates, the next time that turn it would die, it stays alive, is tapped, removes all damage from it, and also removes it from combat. This mechanic has had a few challenges. The first is that flavor. The word regenerate is amazing, and it often would go on cards like Skeletons. The problem is, that's not quite how regenerate worked. It didn't pull things back from the graveyard, it stopped them from going there in the first place. Reassembling Skeleton is much more like what people think regeneration is, whereas regeneration is a lot more like a one-time shield counter. The second is that it was complex. It does so much. It looks ahead into the future of the turn, sure, but there's also weird quirks like tapping and removing from combat that are easy to forget about. Temporary Indestructible did the same thing, but with way less complexity. And finally, even despite all that, it wasn't that fun. Unkillable creatures have to be used sparingly, and at common and uncommon on creatures, this could cause all kinds of challenges. Ultimately, the advent of Indestructible getting used more and more heralded the beginning of the downfall of Regeneration. The last new Regeneration card was an Oath of the Gatewatch in 2016. It could always come back for a stint in a Horizon set or Commander deck, but it would need a good reason. But it lived a good life, lasting up until recently. I like to think Regeneration is the cool aunt, out on a beach somewhere, sipping a nice fruity drink. Thanks for the memories, Regeneration. Next up is a big one, flying. What this mechanic does is, I probably don't need to explain this one. In fact, I would argue flying is the best mechanic in all of Magic, not just because of the gameplay, but because it's so flavorfully intuitive. Even someone brand new to the game can immediately pick up how flying works. That creature is in the air, so you can only block it with flyers. But of course, you can swoop on down to block other ground creatures. Setting aside Portal 3 Kingdoms, more information on that set in my video all about Portal, every Magic set has had flying. It's absolutely integral to the game and helps make sure there are ways to break through and end the game. It's made it all the way up to today, nearly 30 years later, and I don't see it going anywhere. The successful big sibling everyone looks up to, flying, is here to stay. Up third is one you'll also recognize, First Strike. I guess for flavor order I should have put this one first, but anyway, this one is an interesting case. First Strike creatures deal their combat damage before creatures without First Strike, though a surprisingly complex mechanic when you get into the nitty-gritty of it. For example, as I covered in my video all about ninjutsu tricks, you can First Strike, ninja the creature back, and then still have the ninja deal regular damage. The name, once again, does a ton of heavy lifting here. What does a First Strike creature do? Well, it strikes first. Duh. Now, First Strike is still used today, but unlike flying, First Strike is not the perfect poster child of a mechanic. It's more of the sibling that has a bit of a stain on its record. This is because of a design element of First Strike. While the mechanic sounds like it's all about attacking, it's actually dramatically more powerful on defense. Imagine I have a Youthful Knight and you have 2 Fearless Halberdiers. If I attack, you can simply not block and take 2. But by holding up my 2/1, you can't really afford to attack with either of your creatures. It stymies the whole attack. In fact, unless I was really trying to race, I would probably need 4 Fearless Halberdiers before I was okay attacking into a single Youthful Knight. This becomes even more problematic with multiple First Strike creatures, because now your 2 Youthful Knights can dissuade any 4 toughness creature from attacking too. Because your opponent can choose how to block your 2/1 on defense, but you get to use it on offense, it runs into a problem we in design call a wall of First Strike. If we could do Magic over again, we would likely only make First Strike work while you're attacking, or on your turn. You've even seen us experiment with this on cards like Pouncing Lynx and Blood Petal Celebrant. You can certainly expect to see more of this in the future. First Strike is still in the game, and I don't see it going anywhere super soon. But also, if you time traveled back to me from 10 years in the future and told me it had been replaced with a new mechanic that was just First Strike while attacking, I'd believe it. Sorry, First Strike. Next is Landwalk, which I did a YouTube short on and was actually the inspiration for this video. If you want, you can go watch it. It's less than a minute long. But to expand a bit, Landwalk meant the creature couldn't be blocked if an opponent controlled lands of that type. Evasion is very important in Magic, and flying is a backbone of the game. But the problem with Landwalk is that it's very all or nothing, and punishing for things you can't really control in the game. The variance on Landwalk creatures is so high. Either they're overcosted creatures that don't do much efficiently at all, or they're an excellent price for pure unblockability. And in the case of the latter, they're pretty unfun across the table. You can't block it at all, so I just hope you find a removal spell. What are you going to do? Not play your lands? Now, I actually like having cards that hate on colors. They make for great sideboard cards and even help new players figure out how to fight certain decks. The Death Marks and Mystical Disputes of the world are totally solid, but unblockability for just playing a color is both really frustrating and also for constructed play, often not enough. It hit the wrong spot, sort of like an annoying cousin. The last new Landwalk card in a standard set was Meandering Tower Shell in Khans of Tarkir, though we have returned to the mechanic in Modern Horizons 2 for some fun throwbacks. I predict we'll see the odd Landwalk card here and there in supplemental sets, but by and large, the mechanic is retired. That said, I'm still on the hunt to get Urza's Walk into a set someday. Come on, Mystery Booster 2. Speaking of mechanics that host specific colors, let's talk about using protection. The magic mechanic. Protection is similarly brutal in ways Landwalk is. If you're playing mono red and your opponent plays a core Firewalker, you feel pretty helpless. You can't kill it or block it. You're in a tough spot just because you decided to play red that day. It also has this big barrier in how complex it is. To understand protection, you need to memorize DEBT, or DET. Damage, enchants or equips, blocking, and targeting. These are all the things that protection stops, and it's a handful. And then it doesn't stop some things players might expect, like board sweepers. Yes, Day of Judgment does kill a Black Knight, even if it sounds kind of odd. One really unique thing about protection is we actually put it into retirement from standard sets, then brought it back. We talked about ending protection for those reasons after original Theros block, saw some stragglers in standard with Dragon Hunter and some combat tricks like Feat of Resistance, and then it was pretty much gone entirely, just appearing on Emrakul to solve a gameplay concern, which could have been solved just as well by hexproof from instance, and frankly, the card didn't need it. Oops. But then, with Magic 2020, we brought protection back. What happened there? When we moved to retire protection, our thought was that we would come up with a good replacement for it. We experimented, doing things like hexproof from colors, as you see in Knight of Grace and Malice, a riff on White and Black Knight. But none of it really stuck and did the job. If you're looking for an answer to White decks, Knight of Malice isn't really doing the trick. Creatures could still get in the way very easily. And while protection could be very frustrating, it at least did the job we wanted for constructed of being good answers for decks, unlike Landwalk, where the unblockability was usually not a big deal. The name protection was also just really powerful and evocative. We experimented internally with variants on protection that just did a couple of the things protection did, but ultimately decided to just put protection back on the menu. Notably, it's really only for uncommons and rares now. It's complex and not super fun at common. We've made a handful in standard set since. One piece of technology that seems to work a lot better is protection from things which aren't colors. So it's not that your whole deck is hosed because you're playing that color, but you might need a different kind of answer to Catilda than just the vampires you have. Protection is like a father, where you didn't really fully believe that his fatherly advice was important, but now, in retrospect, you do see the wisdom and take it yourself. Just in moderation, of course. Second to last, we have Trample. Despite the total brick of reminder text needed for this keyword, it's a great one for the game for a couple reasons. First of all, it's so easy to explain when just talking about it. The damage it would deal while attacking tramples over. In fact, we even call this a stealth teaching mechanic. The existence of Trample teaches brand new players that extra damage doesn't always carry over, which, if you've taught Magic before, you know a lot of people tend to think. It only tramples over if you have Trample. Haste is another example of of a stealth teaching mechanic, which teaches people you can't attack immediately. I love these. But moreover, the gameplay is also just good. It makes you think about blocking in a whole different way and makes big creatures better. Getting 1/1 tokens put in front of your Colossal Dreadmaw would be so frustrating without the trample. If I'm nitpicking here, the name trample could maybe be better as breakthrough or something like that to communicate what it is and be a better flavor fit for all big creatures. It sometimes feels weird to put on cards. I don't know how much literal trampling Storev is doing, for example. But trample is a great, reliable sister, and while it's no flying, it's good pals with flying. They're on good terms, and when you get a flample card, well, that's just two great mechanics right there. And that brings us to the 7th one, a magic mechanic which will live in infamy. Banding. What does banding do? Well, to just borrow the helpful reminder text from Banding Sliver, it's simple. Any creatures with banding and up to 1 without can attack in a band. Bands are blocked as a group. If any creatures with banding you control are blocking or being blocked by a creature, you divide that creature's combat damage, not its controller, among any of the creatures it's being blocked by or is blocking. Huh? Whew. Banding is one of those things which has gained Magic notoriety for being wild and confusing, a relic of the early days of Magic. It is definitely the estranged uncle. People couldn't understand it, it was difficult to write out, and it was secretly very powerful on defense. But I'm actually going to say something you might not expect here. I'm going to defend banding. The thing about banding is that it's very hard to write out in Magic-ese, but substantially easier to explain just using plain English. It essentially works like this. When you attack, you can put your creatures in a band. If one is blocked, they're all blocked. If you're blocking with a banding creature, all the creatures blocking that creature are in a band. Then, when banding is involved, you get to choose how your opponents deal combat damage. So if your Banalish Infantry and a Grizzly Bear block their Hill Giant, you can divvy up the damage with 1 on the bear and 2 on the infantry. This team-up concept is actually pretty good. The issue is in both the explanation in rules or on a card, which is horrifying, and in power level. Like First Strike, it's another mechanic which is wildly more powerful on defense. Having 2 of your attacking creatures stopped by their 1 blocker is pretty bad, whereas using 2 creatures to kill an opponent's and not losing 1 on defense is quite strong. And while it didn't work out with banding, which was overly complex, the core idea here has been used again and again. Mechanics like Battalion, Exalted, and... oh, wait, they don't know about yet? Huh, well, anyway, they all trace their lineage right back to banding. There was a lot of good here, even if they didn't get it right the first time. So while banding might be the estranged uncle, I'd argue it's the misunderstood estranged uncle, whose heart is in the right place. Now, bands with legends, we can forget about that one. So that's where this family is now that they're all grown up. A bit of Magic's family history. And you'll see some of these in any given Commander family reunion. If you had to remove one of these from the game or bring one back, which would you choose? Sound off in the comments down below. I'll talk with you again soon. And until then, may you get the band back together. You got this. Oh yeah, there's our zombie friend. Here he is. Wow. Looks super scary. That's where the arms are gonna go. I can only presume slotting in here. He looks pretty mean. So Liliana definitely doing some necromancy, definitely raising up a zombie here. We got some zombie arms, just casual zombie arms.